There is a silent habit destroying your capacity for power, and you practice it every single day. It is a behavior so heavily normalized by modern society that we use it to bond, to connect, and to fill empty conversations. But this exact behavior is the reason you feel drained, stuck, and powerless against your circumstances. There is an ancient ironclad directive for those who wish to command their own reality. Let no one hear you complain, not even yourself. This is not about toxic positivity. It is about recognizing that every time you voice a grievance out loud or in your own mind, you are actively choosing weakness. Today we will dismantle the architecture of the complaint, expose why it is an addiction, and rebuild your mind with absolute unbreakable silence. When you complain to others, you believe you are simply sharing your frustration or seeking a moment of understanding. But what you are actually doing is broadcasting your complete helplessness. You are actively positioning yourself as a victim who is entirely at the mercy of external forces. While people might offer you temporary sympathy, that pity comes with a massive invisible cost. No one ultimately respects or relies on the person who is constantly overwhelmed by the weather of their own life. This behavior acts as an absolute repellent for opportunity. Highly capable individuals, potential mentors, and valuable allies are drawn to people of action. They look for problem solvers, not those who merely point out that a problem exists. When you complain out loud, you are building a massive brick wall between yourself and the very people who have the capacity to elevate you. You signal to the world that you are a liability, not an asset, when friction inevitably occurs. But here's the part people usually miss. The damage does not just affect how others see you, it solidifies how you see yourself. Every word of complaint spoken aloud reinforces your own perceived inability to handle the situation. To reverse this, you must adopt a strict policy of verbal containment. You stop narrating your difficulties to an audience. You absorb the friction silently, protecting your reputation as someone who handles their reality rather than crying about it. The external complaint is damaging, but the internal complaint is utterly lethal. This is the quiet dialogue nobody else hears. The constant whispering voice in your head insisting that life is unfair, that you're not given enough credit, or that everything is just too difficult. You assume that because these thoughts are silent, they are harmless, but this internal monologue is a slow-acting poison that you're injecting directly into your own psychological framework every single hour. Neuroscience shows us that repetition builds reality. When you internally complain, you are physically reinforcing the neural pathways of negativity. You are actively training your brain to scan the horizon exclusively for threats, injustices, and reasons to be miserable. This silent lamentation drains the exact mental energy and focus you desperately need to actually alter your circumstances. You cannot build a fortified empire if you're housing a relentless traitor inside your own walls. This is where the real change begins. You have to treat your internal monologue with the same ruthless scrutiny you would apply to a physical intruder. The rule, not even yourself, means catching the thought before it spirals. It requires the brutal discipline of observing the mental complaint and actively refusing to engage with it. You cut the oxygen to the thought, letting it die in the dark, rather than allowing it to dictate your emotional state. We must address the uncomfortable truth. Complaining is an addiction. It operates on the exact same neurological loops as any other destructive habit. When you complain, your brain receives a tiny immediate hit of dopamine. It provides a fleeting sense of validation, a quick burst of self-pity, and a temporary bond with other people who are also avoiding their responsibilities. It feels strangely good to be the victim for a moment, because the victim is never the one at fault. But like any cheap drug, the high vanishes instantly, leaving you weaker than before. The addiction to complaining allows you to completely evade the heavy burden of taking action. As long as you're talking about how terrible the situation is, you do not actually have to do the terrifying work of fixing it. You trade the difficult pursuit of long-term power for the cheap, immediate comfort of having an excuse. Breaking this habit requires the exact same severe discipline as breaking any chemical dependency. You will feel the withdrawal, you will feel the desperate urge to vent, to seek sympathy, to let the pressure out through useless words. This is where most people fail. You must recognize the craving for self-pity and intentionally deny yourself that comfort. You must sit with the uncomfortable pressure of the problem without opening the release valve of the complaint. And once you notice this pattern, another one becomes easier to see. The addiction to complaining eventually hardens into a permanent identity. You start to derive your entire sense of self from your struggles, your disadvantages, and the wrongs committed against you. The victim mentality is incredibly seductive because it demands absolutely nothing from you. If the world is rigged and everyone is against you, then your lack of progress is completely justified. Living as the victim is comfortable because it removes the terrifying weight of accountability. If you are not responsible for the chaos, you are not responsible for the cleanup. But this comfort is a cage. When you surrender your responsibility, you simultaneously surrender all of your power. You cannot claim ownership over your successes if you refuse to take ownership of your disastrous circumstances. That is where the pattern repeats. You must aggressively evict the victim from your psyche, even if a situation is genuinely not your fault. Complaining about it keeps you paralyzed in the exact spot the damage occurred. True strength requires you to look at an unfair, brutal scenario and accept total responsibility for your reaction to it. You drop the narrative of what should have happened, and you ruthlessly focus on what you will do next. Slowly, your attention starts to return to the mechanics of your own mind. The most subtle way you keep yourself weak is through the specific vocabulary you choose. The words you use do not just describe your reality, they actively construct it. When you constantly label situations as problems, you attach a heavy, negative, paralyzing weight to the event. A problem feels like a dead end, a reason to stop, a justification for failure. The language of the defeated is filled with absolute passive terminology. I have this massive problem. Things are always going wrong. This is impossible. These phrases are micro-complaints that instruct your nervous system to shut down and prepare for defeat. You convince yourself that the barrier in front of you is a permanent wall rather than a temporary hurdle. You talk yourself out of the fight before you even throw a punch. The next shift is simple, but not easy. You must completely eradicate the word problem from your internal and external vocabulary. Replace it instantly with the word obstacle. An obstacle implies a path exists. It implies a challenge that requires navigation, strength, and strategy to overcome. This single linguistic shift transforms your posture from a passive victim suffering under a problem to an active protagonist conquering an obstacle. Society has convinced you that venting your frustrations is a healthy emotional release. You're told that keeping things inside will destroy you, so you must let the pressure out. This is a massive psychological illusion. Venting does not empty the tank, it simply pours gasoline on the fire. When you furiously detail everything that is going wrong, you are not healing. You are rehearsing your anger and giving it permanent residence in your mind. By vocalizing your misery, you validate it. You convince your nervous system that the threat is not just real, but insurmountable. Every time you call a friend to complain about your day, you are living the negative experience twice. You drain the people around you and you leave the conversation feeling justified in your bitterness, but completely unequipped to actually change the situation that caused it. This is not discipline. This is self-respect. The next time you feel the overwhelming impulse to vent, close your mouth. Practice the harsh art of disciplined silence. Do not say it. Do not text it. Simply observe the burning desire to complain and consciously let it die. You are training your mind to understand that you are the absolute master of your emotional state, not a slave to your reactive impulses. And once you notice this pattern, another one becomes easier to see. At its core, every single complaint is born from a profound resistance to reality. It is the childish desire for things to be different than they actually are. You stand in the rain and scream at the clouds for getting you wet. This resistance is a catastrophic waste of your most valuable and finite resource, your daily emotional energy. While you're busy fighting ghosts and arguing with the universe about fairness, the situation remains exactly the same. You burn hours wishing your boss was different, wishing the market was easier, or wishing your past had not happened. This futile struggle leaves you entirely depleted. You cannot alter the fabric of what has already occurred, yet you sacrifice your present power trying to negotiate with it. The antidote is not passive resignation, but active acceptance. You look at the brutal reality of your situation and you state it as a sterile fact. This is exactly what is happening. Now what will I do about it? When you drop the resistance and accept the terrain, all the energy you wasted on wishing things were different is instantly liberated. You stop arguing with reality and you start navigating it. The next part is quieter, but more important. Pay close attention to the subject of your complaints. You will realize that the vast majority of your frustration is directed at things entirely outside of your control. The economy, the traffic, the opinions of strangers, the unpredictable nature of the market. You obsess over these external variables because it gives you the illusion of participating in the problem. But this outward focus causes a rapid atrophy of your ability to take action. When your mind is completely occupied by things you cannot change, you conveniently forget to manage the few things you can. You surrender your agency, you become a professional spectator of your own life, offering constant commentary on how terrible the game is being played, while firmly refusing to step onto the field yourself. You must draw a hard, uncompromising line in your mind. Identify the absolute limits of your control. Your thoughts, your immediate actions, and your relentless effort go inside that circle. Absolutely everything else belongs outside. You must dedicate 100% of your available energy to the interior of that circle. When the external world becomes chaotic, you ignore the noise and tighten your grip on the wheel. Slowly, your attention starts to return. When you focus solely on what is wrong, your mind enters a closed loop of helplessness. It is like staring so intently at a locked door that you completely fail to notice the open window right next to it. The complaint narrows your vision. It forces you to fixate on the lack of resources, blinding you to the tools and opportunities that are already sitting quietly in your hands. This loop is vicious because it feels entirely justified. Your brain gathers evidence to prove why you should be miserable, and because you're looking for it, you always find it. This self-fulfilling prophecy ensures that your external reality continually matches your internal despair. You cannot see a way out because your internal dialogue is constantly loudly broadcasting the exact reasons why escape is impossible. But here is the part people usually miss. You have a weapon to shatter this loop instantly, though you rarely use it. It is impossible to complain and feel profound gratitude at the exact same moment. They are mutually exclusive psychological states. When the darkness closes in, you force your mind to find three undeniable things you possess right now. You use gratitude not as a soft emotion, but as a tactical anchor to reality. This brings us to a harsh realization. Every useless word spoken in frustration is a micro-betrayal of your own capabilities. When you whine about the weight of your responsibilities, you are actively insulting your own potential. You are looking in the mirror and declaring that you're not strong enough to carry the load. You are disrespecting the immense resilience and creativity that you actually possess. A true master does not complain about the intensity of the battle. They simply sharpen their blade. They understand that complaining is the language of the defeated. When you allow those words to escape your lips, you signal to your deepest self that you have already lost. You strip away your own armor. The words themselves become the heavy chains that prevent you from standing back up and doing what is required. And this is where clarity begins. By refusing to give voice to your discomfort, you send a radically different message to your subconscious. You silently declare, I am fully capable. I can withstand this pressure. I am larger than my current circumstances. The quiet power of holding your tongue under immense stress forges a core of iron. You stop negotiating with your weakness, and you demand absolute strength. The next shift is simple, but not easy. You must treat your mind like a fortress and silence as your primary weapon. When the urge to complain rises in your throat, you must learn to physically swallow it. You do not suppress the feeling. You simply refuse to give it a voice. This is the raw mechanics of building internal power. You choose to absorb the impact of the inconvenience without broadcasting it to the world. At first, this will feel incredibly uncomfortable. Your brain is wired to seek the immediate relief of venting. When you deny yourself that release, the pressure builds. You will feel an intense psychological friction, a desperate need to let someone know how difficult your situation is. But giving in to that pressure is exactly what keeps you fragile. You must train your nervous system to tolerate the weight of unresolved frustration. This is where most people confuse comfort with progress. The discomfort of remaining silent is the exact sensation of you getting stronger. As you hold your tongue, the frantic energy of the complaint has nowhere to go but inward, transforming into a cold, focused drive. You stop being a leaky vessel, losing power with every word. You become entirely sealed, gathering the silent momentum necessary to actually move the heavy obstacles in your path. And once you notice this pattern, another one becomes easier to see with your silence established. You must violently restructure your internal vocabulary. The words you think do not just describe your environment, they dictate your limitations. When you label an event as a problem, you signal to your brain that you are facing a dead end. A problem is heavy, stagnant, and inherently negative. It implies that something is broken and you are the victim of it. This passive language breeds a passive identity. You sit back and wait for the problem to be solved by time or by someone else. You stare at the wall, detailing every reason why it is too high to climb. Your energy is entirely consumed by the existence of the barrier. The longer you use the language of defeat, the more permanent the situation feels, until you completely surrender your agency to the circumstance. You thought you needed more motivation. You needed less noise. The immediate correction is to strip the word problem from your mind entirely. You are now facing an obstacle. An obstacle is neutral. It is simply a physical or mental barrier placed on a path. It demands movement. It requires you to go over, under, or straight through it. By changing one single word, you instantly transform from a helpless observer into an active strategist. Slowly, your attention starts to return. When you view the world through the lens of obstacles, you unlock the mechanism of active acceptance. Most people fight reality. They spend their days wishing the past was different, wishing people were kinder, or wishing the work was easier. They argue with the universe, bleeding out their daily energy in a desperate, entirely useless protest against the facts of their current existence. This resistance is the root of all mental exhaustion. You cannot bend reality by simply disagreeing with it. The more you fight against the undeniable truth of your situation, the more entrenched you become in your own suffering. You are like a man drowning because he is too busy complaining about the water to actually start swimming. The refusal to accept the baseline reality is the ultimate form of self-sabotage. But this is only the surface. Active acceptance means looking at the brutal, unvarnished truth of your life and stating, "This is exactly what is happening, and it is entirely mine to deal with." You do not have to like it, you just have to stop fighting its existence. The moment you drop the resistance, the massive amount of energy you used to complain is instantly redirected into the raw power required to build a way out. The next part is quieter, but more important. As you stop arguing with reality, you will experience a massive return of mental bandwidth. Complaining is an incredibly demanding cognitive task. It requires you to maintain a mental inventory of everything that has wronged you, constantly refreshing the list so you never forget to be miserable. It occupies the prime real estate of your mind, leaving no room for actual execution. Think about the hours you have lost mentally arguing with people who are not even in the room. You rehearse conflicts, you formulate the perfect comebacks to perceived insults, and you endlessly analyze how unfairly you were treated. This ghostboxing exhausts your nervous system before your day has even truly begun. You arrive at your real work already depleted, having spent your best energy fighting phantom battles. This is the quiet trap. You must ruthlessly guard your mental space. When you refuse to harbor complaints, your mind clears. The fog of resentment lifts. You suddenly have the absolute clarity to focus on the immediate, practical steps in front of you. You stop analyzing why the fire started and you simply pick up the water. This reclaimed bandwidth is the secret advantage of those who seem to effortlessly outwork everyone else. This is where the real change begins. With your mind clear, you must draw a brutal, uncompromising boundary around your life. You have to clearly define what is within your absolute control and what belongs to the chaotic external world. Your opinions, your relentless effort, your immediate reactions, and your discipline. These belong to you. The economy, the weather, and the unpredictable opinions of strangers do not. When you invest your emotional stability in things outside of this circle, you become a permanent hostage to chance. If your peace depends on the market being good or people treating you fairly, you will spend your entire life violently swinging between anxiety and despair. You give away the keys to your own mind to a world that does not care about you. This is the ultimate tragic abdication of personal power. The real cost is not what you lost. It is who you became while ignoring it. You must violently pull all of your attention back inside the circle. If an event occurs outside of your direct control, it requires zero emotional investment. You observe it, you adjust your strategy, and you remain entirely untouched by it. You become the quiet architect of your own responses, building a life that is completely immune to the unpredictable storms outside. As you master the silence, you must introduce a proactive defense. Silence stops the bleeding, but you need a mechanism to rebuild the lost momentum. The most effective tool against the poison of self-pity is not false positivity. It is the aggressive, tactical application of gratitude. It is forcing a perspective shift when your mind desperately wants to wallow in the dark. Neurologically, it is physically impossible to feel deep, genuine gratitude and helpless resentment at the exact same time. They occupy the same mental space. When the internal complaint tries to surface, you do not just ignore it, you override it. You force your brain to identify the undeniable advantages you currently possess. You weaponize the good to completely crush the bad. That is where the pattern repeats. You do not use this tool when life is easy and the sun is shining. You deploy it precisely when everything is falling apart, by forcing yourself to acknowledge the air in your lungs or the strength in your hands during a crisis. You instantly pull yourself out of the victim role. You reclaim your position as the active commander of your reality. We arrive at the brutal core of why complaining is so destructive. Every time you vocalize a grievance about the difficulty of your path, you are actively insulting your own potential. You are looking at a challenge and declaring that your own resilience, creativity, and strength are insufficient to meet it. It is an act of profound self-disrespect disguised as a search for sympathy. A true warrior does not stand on the battlefield and complain that the enemy is too fierce or the weather is too cold. He simply sharpens his blade and adjusts his stance. When you whine about the weight of your responsibilities, you are telling yourself that you are weak. You are stripping away your own armor and handing your power over to the very obstacle you are supposed to destroy. The next shift is simple but not easy. You must stop negotiating with your own weakness. Refuse to let the language of defeat cross your lips or occupy your thoughts. When the pressure mounts, you do not complain about the heat. You recognize it as the forge. You send a quiet, undeniable message to your subconscious that you are vastly more powerful than the circumstances surrounding you. In the face of adversity, you are constantly making a choice about your identity. You can either be the leaf or you can be the rock. The leaf has no weight, no roots, and no internal direction. It is entirely at the mercy of the wind. With every gust of misfortune, it is violently tossed around, rustling, and complaining as it is dragged through a reality it cannot control. Every time you complain about the unfairness of your situation, you are actively choosing to be the leaf. You are broadcasting to the world and to yourself that you have no solid internal core. You demonstrate that your emotional state is dictated entirely by the unpredictable weather of the day. You become a helpless passenger in your own existence, constantly reacting to the external chaos. But this is only the surface. The alternative is to become the rock. The rock sits in the middle of the raging storm and remains completely unmoved. The wind howls, the rain lashes against it, but the rock does not complain about the temperature. It simply exists, dense, heavy, and unbreakable. Your ultimate goal is to cultivate that profound internal solidity, remaining completely unbothered by the noise. Slowly, your attention starts to return. This unbreakable core is not something you are born with, it is something you systematically construct through the daily discipline of silence. Every single time you successfully swallow a complaint, you add another layer of armor to your mind. You are proving to yourself repeatedly that you can endure intense discomfort without breaking your composure. The ultimate reward of this practice is the attainment of true mental freedom. You reach a state where your internal peace is completely divorced from the chaos of the external world. You no longer need the market to be favorable, people to be polite, or the path to be easy in order to maintain your focus. Your stability is generated entirely from within, making you immune to manipulation. And this is where clarity begins. When you stop bleeding energy through the cracks of complaining, your mind becomes a cold, calculated control room. You observe disasters and setbacks as sterile, objective data points rather than personal tragedies. You respond to massive crises with a terrifying calm because your internal state is fully secured. You have finally become the master of your own domain. We arrive at the final destination of this psychological shift. When you completely eradicate the habit of complaining, all the energy that was once wasted on useless words is forcefully channeled into pure, relentless execution. You stop telling people what you're going to do, you stop explaining why it is so difficult, and you simply put your head down and do the necessary work. There is an undeniable magnetic power in the person who suffers in silence and produces massive results. While the rest of the world is busy exchanging excuses and bonding over their shared victimhood, you are operating on a completely different frequency. Your actions become your only voice. You let the undeniable quality of your finished work speak for the difficulty of the journey. This is not discipline. This is self-respect. You have built a reality where your power is absolute because it relies on no one else. You have starved the internal traitor, accepted the brutal facts of your existence, and chosen the path of the unshakable rock. The habit of complaining has been burned out of your system, leaving behind nothing but the quiet, dangerous momentum of a truly unstoppable mind. The directive to let no one hear you complain, not even yourself, is the ultimate separator between the weak and the truly powerful. It is the dividing line between those who suffer at the mercy of their circumstances and those who forge their own destiny. Society has normalized the language of the victim, encouraging you to vent your frustrations and surrender your agency. But you now understand the lethal cost of that comfort. Every complaint is a leak in your psychological armor, a drain on your vital energy, and an insult to your own vast potential. By embracing the iron discipline of silence, you reclaim your mental bandwidth. You stop fighting the unchangeable reality and start aggressively navigating the obstacles in your path. You transform from the fragile leaf, blown by the wind of external events, into the dense, immovable rock that commands its own space. This is the path of absolute self-mastery. The journey is quiet, solitary, and brutally demanding, but the reward is total sovereignty over your own mind. If this message resonated with your internal compass, subscribe to the channel. We will continue to dismantle the illusions that keep men weak and build the cold, calculated strength required to conquer the modern world.